How is it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Ethan Bridge and I'm host of the Social Media Marketing School podcast and the guy behind the Instagram page at The Marketing Ethan. If this is the first time you are stumbling across this channel, or if you've watched a couple of videos in the past, make sure you have hit that subscribe button and that like button just to help me with that YouTube algorithm. But now I've mentioned that, let's just dive straight into today's video. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about producing evergreen content. When you create content on social media, you need to have a good mix of evergreen content and content that is very, very short term and applicable and reactive to current trends. Evergreen content is essentially content that is going to be able to be applicable over an extended period of time and stay continually relevant no matter when somebody may click on or consume that piece of content. So essentially, it lasts forever. Whereas a lot of content that you consume on Instagram will only be applicable to consume at that very specific point in time or within a very specific time frame. That is more what we like to call reactive content. Now, it's good to have a mix of the two. You don't want all of one and none of the other, or all of the other and none of the other. So it's a good idea to make sure you have a mix. Now, reactive content is very easy to talk about. It's content where you adapt to trends. If something that is continuously going viral, or you see that something is doing and performing well, you jump on that trend, create content, and it normally is only applicable for that point in time because trends tend to die down after a couple of weeks or maybe even a few days. But that is where you need to also back up that content strategy with evergreen content that where people will be able to come to your account and consume it no matter the time. So that's why today I wanted to talk through some tips to producing this evergreen content. So without any further ado, let's just dive into tip number 1, and that is to make sure that you are keeping your language simple. Don't use any industry jargon or complicated words to make your knowledge level sound like it's higher than it actually is, or try to impress an audience with these big fancy words that you're using. No one actually cares. They just want to be able to consume your content in the simplest way possible. So keeping that language simple is actually more of a talent, in my opinion, than being able to use these fancy big industry jargon words. Now, you've also got to think that when you are using that complicated language, you very much niche down that content to a specific group of people that will be able to understand that language. It's not applicable to everyone now because not everyone's going to be able to understand it. Whereas if you were to make that language simple, it's going to apply to a wider group of people. Now you can see how we're edging on this evergreen content here, because no matter what knowledge level someone may be at, no matter where they are throughout their journey, no matter where they may be coming from to consume your piece of content, no matter who they are, they will be able to understand it because the language that you've used throughout that piece of content is simple. If you were to make it complicated, it wouldn't be evergreen, because if someone was new to the journey, they wouldn't be able to consume that piece of content because they wouldn't be able to understand it because of the language you've used. They would only be able to understand it when they reached the knowledge level where they would understand the terminology that you've used. But if you'd kept it simple, they would have been able to consume it if they were a newbie or whether they were incredibly experienced. It doesn't really matter when they consumed it. So keep that language simple so it can be consumed by anyone, no matter their knowledge level, no matter where they're coming from, no matter their experience with the topic that you're actually talking about. Tip number 2, do not date your content. Now, this is one that is actually incredibly simple, but a lot of people do tend to do it. If you go onto YouTube, for example, you'll see that people have these clickbait thumbnails of the best content strategy to grow on Instagram in 2021. That limits that piece of content to 2021. Unless you go back and change the title every single year, which is just extra effort, people are going to assume that that piece of content was only applicable to that year. So let's say someone found that piece of content in 2023, they're not going to want to consume that because they'll see it as being outdated because you have actually dated that piece of content 2021. Whereas if you had just named it the best Instagram strategies to grow your account, there's no specific time frame there. You aren't saying to people that it was the best in 2019 or it's going to be the best in 2022. It's just for a wide range of dates. It could be applicable at any time, no matter when somebody is actually consuming it. So by not dating your content, people aren't going to associate that piece of content with a specific time period, which means that they are more likely to consume it no matter when they are actually finding it. Even if they're consuming it 5 years down the line, if it's still the content topic they want to learn about, they will still see it as being applicable because you haven't specifically date stamped that piece of content. So do not mention dates in your headlines, in your descriptions, in the content itself, because if you do, you're making it specific to that period of time, which then doesn't make it evergreen. Tip number 3, try and be a little bit more specific with the topics you are talking about. When you talk about really, really broad topics, you open up more opportunity for change. If you're talking about a real range of topics, then it's likely that over the next 2-3 years, strategies within that topic are going to change. But if you niche down into a very specific topic, it's much less likely that those tactics that you may be talking about or the problem you are solving is going to change because you have been much more specific. Whereas if you were to be broader, you're opening up for that opportunity for something to have changed. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here, because I feel as if I'm waffling a bit, so I do apologize if this isn't specific enough. But if you really niche down, there's less to change. But if you are much broader with what you are talking about, there's way more topics within that broader idea that you're talking about that are susceptible to change. So the more niche you can be, the less likely that niche topic will change, which means it's much more evergreen because it's less likely to change over a period of time. So be specific with that content. It is a shorter point I wanted to mention, but I did want to throw it in there. Now, the final thing I want to mention is talking about the fundamentals. The fundamentals of pretty much anything will always be standard. When it comes to Instagram growth, content creation, engagement strategies, building a community, these things, no matter when you're trying to grow an account on Instagram, they will never change. When you're growing a podcast, being consistent with your uploads, picking a niche, building an audience, building an email list, any of these things, the fundamentals are never going to change. The quick tips, the shortcuts, the in and out strategies, they are susceptible to change because they aren't the fundamentals. People come up with these little strategies over time that are very popular for a specific of time, and then they'll wear off and they won't perform very well. That's not evergreen content because they change. But the fundamentals stay the same. If you create content about the fundamentals, you know for a fact that these specific fundamentals that you're talking about are going to be evergreen pieces of content. But you need to know that they are the fundamentals. Let's just talk about weightlifting, for example. Squats, deadlifts, bench press, the fundamental lifts. They are never going to change throughout weightlifting future. I know this is a podcast about social media, but it's just an easy one to talk about. If you're playing football, passing, it's a fundamental skill within the game that is always going to be there. If you don't know how to pass the ball, you cannot play football. But this just shows how it is applicable to a niche you may be talking about on social media. If you're building a business, sales. Sales is a fundamental skill if you want to close new clients. But back to Instagram, like I was saying, building a community, having a solid content strategy, having a solid engagement strategy, these are the fundamental things that will always stay the same no matter when you're trying to grow a page on Instagram. So if you talk about some fundamentals within your content strategy, you know that these key pillars that you're talking about here will always be evergreen pieces of content that people can refer to. They will always be applicable when people see your page. And they round up my tips for producing evergreen content. Let's just quickly recap. Number 1, Be simple with your language. No industry jargon, no long, complicated words, because you need anyone, no matter the experience level, no matter where they may be coming from, to be able to understand your content. And simple language is going to help them do just that. Number 2, do not date your content. This is a very simple one, but a lot of people do it. If you date your content, you're making it specific to that time period that you have mentioned. Number 3, be more specific. If you have a broader topic idea, the ideas within that are more susceptible to change because there's more to talk about. Whereas if you are more specific, there's less things that are susceptible to change. And finally, talk about the fundamentals. The fundamentals, no matter when someone may consume your content, will always be the same, and it could be applicable across thousands of different niches. The fundamentals are the fundamentals for a reason. People need to learn them if they want to succeed in whatever they may be doing. So create content on the fundamentals, and you will always have those solid pieces of evergreen content for your page. And that wraps up today's video. If you did enjoy, I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and turned on post notifications. That way you will never miss a video when I post one. But I did just want to mention that this is a part of my podcast series, Social Media Marketing School, and the audio version of the podcast is the place to be because I release this content a lot sooner on the audio version of the podcast than I do here on YouTube. So I'll leave some links to that in the description below, so make sure you're heading down and subscribing. But if you've got any questions with regards to pretty much anything that I've mentioned, please just reach out to me on Instagram at @themarketingethan, send me a DM and I'll make sure I get back to you no matter what. But if you have made it to this point in the video, I just want to finish off by saying thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.